Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brother, I wasn't smiling. Was it fine? You know,
Carry on, no, carry on.
he keeps. We've started about 4 times now. He keeps saying to me, "Abu Bakr, you're not smiling." So I'm gonna smile, inshallah. Welcome to another Nasiya session. Today's episode is going to be responding to an email from an atheist. Right? If I just pull up the email, bear with me. So the main question, or one of the questions in the email was, why does Islam not believe in evolution when there is clearly evidence for it? Now, I'm sure most, if not all people watching this will have some sort of idea, some sort of basis of what evolution is. For those of you who don't, or you want me to refresh your memory because it's been, since school days that you last did science, I'll give you a pretty simple, hopefully practical way that you can remember it, give an example, which might make it easier for you to understand the concept. So the type of evolution I'm going to explain, I believe it's called natural selection, right? And this is where, for example, giraffes that we have these days, they have very, very long necks, right? Back in the days, their ancestors, their necks weren't that long. They used to be relatively short compared to how long they are now.
So they look more like horses?
I guess you could say that. Yeah, maybe. I've never seen one.
So a giraffe basically is a horse with a long neck.
Put crudely, I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
Maybe. And basically, obviously, as they were eating, they were munching grass, food, trees, leaves, whatnot, fruits. As time progresses, food gets scarcer and scarcer and scarcer until it gets to a point where they've eaten all the food on the ground. They've eaten all the food that's low on the trees. Now there's food which is high on the trees. Yeah. Now obviously, within any species, you have genetic mutations. You have differences between species, heights. Even in humans, some people are 6 foot tall, some people are 5 foot tall, some people are more than that, some people are less than that. You have these, these variations within the species itself. So obviously, there were some giraffes which had longer necks, and there were some giraffes which had shorter necks. So the ones who had longer necks were at an advantage because I feel like this is a science lesson, bro. Because they could reach the food that was higher up the trees, and therefore they had more chance of survival, and therefore their genes of having longer necks were more likely to be passed down and become dominant as the species progressed over time.
So the ones with the longer necks were surviving, so their longer neck genes were being passed on. And then over a very long period of time, over millenniums, centuries, whatever have you.
So there's more long neck giraffes. So they mated. They had long neck kids who mated and even longer neck kids, and eventually got to a point where you have the giraffes you see today. And Nasir, if you could edit some sort of giraffe, like I know you can mash up with the green screen and that, have a giraffe just walk past, just show people.
If you can make the giraffe eat the mic, that would be sick.
That's a bit too much. I don't think
I'm
you
just
can do
saying
that.
if you could. I'm putting a skill.
It's a challenge. If you can do that, Nasir, that would be quite sick. If not, guys, just ignore us. Let's just move on.
Right. Okay. So look, it's good because the question asks, why don't we believe in evolution, right? As Muslim, but what you've just explained there, Akhi, there's nothing in the Quran or the prophetic Sunnah that prevents us from believing in the kind of evolution that you just described, right?
So this atheist has made an assumption.
Well, he's not entirely wrong in his assumption, because there are parts of evolution that are in direct conflict and opposition with our creed, with our aqidah, right? And we've actually got more reason to believe in our aqidah, and we've got more reason to believe in our aqidah and to disbelieve in the scientific theories with regards to this. But just to kind of
ask, what do you mean by aqidah?
Aqidah means creed, our creed, our Islamic creed, right? So just to kind of make the conversation, kind of just move forward a step, we've got to divide evolution into 2 categories.
Okay.
There's macro evolution and then there's micro evolution. And what you just explained is micro evolution.
Okay.
It's the small, change in a very, kind of dumbed down, crude kind of way. It's the small changes that happen within a particular species over a very long period of time that cause them to adapt towards their particular environment that allows for, their, survival to kind of take place. Do you see where I'm coming from? That's microevolution. It's happening on a micro level within a particular species. Macroevolution is when you're basically saying that you had all human species that came from a common ancestor and that
Like a
common
monkey.
ancestor was, you know, the chimpanzees kind of whatever. I'm not a scientist and I don't need to be a scientist to explain this, but we all get the point, right? That we all have a common ancestor with some primate thing. So they say that there was, you know, Homo erectus, and then they became, you know, there was all these hominids. Before the Homo sapien, there was the Homo erectus, which is a completely different species, and that Homo erectus evolved into the Homo sapien, and so on and so forth.
Is that where the word homosexual comes from?
I don't know where the word homosexual comes from. I
Right.
don't know. But I think homo means like man, that kind of thing. Yeah? So you had these hominids, do you see what I'm saying? Now that's what we have a problem with. Islamically, we have a problem with that. Because we are told that Allah, He created the first Homo sapien, who was Adam. So we as Muslims don't have a problem with literally like all of this other evolution. We don't have a problem with
Within
all,
animals.
within these animals, within the trees, within all of these other organisms, right? Unless an external evidence comes to say, no, this particular thing, no, this didn't evolve, right?
So Islam hasn't negated it.
Hasn't negated
it.
it.
Hasn't affirmed it.
But the only thing that Islam has negated is to believe that the human species was evolved on a macro level. Within a micro level, no problem, because some people say on a micro level that if you look in Russia, for example, I don't know how true this is because, you know, and I'm going to explain in a second, but this is what we were taught in school, that in Russia, because it's colder, the people have more hair. They're more hairier, they have more hairy chests. But then if you go into like Africa, they have less hair because it's hot, so they don't need that hair to keep them warm, right? So even humans can adapt on a micro level to suit their environments. By the way, I don't understand how we as Indians, well, Pakistani Indians, because we're hairy people when it's hot. So I don't know, we kind of, following that theory, we should have not been hairy as well. But
I'm not allowed. I don't think I have a lot just there, to be honest with you.
yeah, keep that hidden. Keep that
Keep
hidden, inshallah. The point I'm trying to make is that we don't necessarily have a problem with saying that humans adapted on a micro level. But to say we adapted or we evolved on a macro level, we have a problem saying that humans adapted on a micro level, but say they did on a macro level, that's something that clearly goes in opposition to our text, to our Quran. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, so
but Allah said in the Quran, in Surah An-Nur, ayah number 45, Allah said, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created everything from water. Every living thing, everything that Allah created, every creature that Allah created came from water, right? That's interesting because when you look into evolutionary biology, you find that, you know, the first organisms that evolved, the first creatures that came, they were actually creatures that were in the water, right? The first organisms. This is in consistency with the Quran, right? Allah said Allah created every living thing from water. So pay attention. Every creation that we see, every creature, its origins was water. So Allah brought it from water, right? So we got no problem saying that these things over a period of time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it in such a way where the process originally started from water and then they ended up in how they are now. And then Allah actually goes on to say, and then from them, Allah created those who they walk ala batnihi, on their stomachs, like the snakes, right? And then Allah said there are those who walk on their two legs, and then there are those who walk on all fours, to show you that all of these various different types of creatures that walk on the earth, these animals that we see, those who are on their stomachs, those who are on their two legs, those who are on their fours, they all came from what? Originally, they all came from water. And there's many other verses like this.
And this was 1400
years ago.
In a desert. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he, you know, conveyed this ayah from Allah. Which was telling us that everything that's been created has come from water. And now science has actually proved that, like, we're 70%
water, right?
70% water.
Right, absolutely. And not only that, evolutionary biology actually explains that the first living organisms that did evolve, the first organisms were they're from water, right? So this is something that's very profound. But what we have an issue with is for you to say that the human species has also basically come from this macro evolutionary process. Do you see? So now that doesn't sound so absurd, because I can understand how it's difficult for people who you know, they're like, you know, there's so much scientific evidence and you guys are just gonna turn a blind eye to it. We're not turning a blind eye to this wealth of scientific evidence. No, what we are turning a blind eye is to the assumption that says that Adam, the first human being, the first Homo sapien, came from this macro process. And the way that we explain that is that was a miracle. A miracle is what? A miracle is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does something that's outside the productive capacity of the natural world. He basically does exactly what He wants to do, and it doesn't necessarily follow the natural process of the way things are going, right? So it's an anomaly that Allah brings into place, because فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد, He does whatever He wills. He creates anything that He wills, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, right? So He decided to interrupt that process with His ability and to place the human being in that way. And then, of course, in order for us to substantiate that claim, we have to substantiate that the Quran is indeed a divine speech and scripture that came from Allah. But that's a discussion for another day. That's a discussion for another day, right?
Okay.
Because the Quran for us is a means of proof. It's a means of evidence, okay? And this Quran, it came from the creator of the heavens and the earth. So now you've got the creation, who are the scientists that are doing their best to try and work out the creation. So we don't mind. We'll take what you say as long as it goes in consistency with what the creator of the heavens and the earth says. But like I said, to substantiate that claim, which we've got no problem doing, but that's a discussion for another day.
Okay, so I've got a question, right? So here the person said, now that obviously we've differentiated between evolution in other creatures and evolution in humans, which Islam clearly negates.
But Islam doesn't negate necessarily the micro evolution.
The macro from the origin of human
exactly.
species.
So human beings can adapt.
Okay, so he says why. So he says there is clearly evidence.
Yeah.
Why does someone believe in evolution when there is clearly evidence? So which evidence is he referring to? Because obviously there's evidence for micro in animals, macro in animals, micro in humans, macro in. So which evidence is clearly there?
Okay, good. So let's discuss scientific evidence now. Okay, we live in this day and age where people they speak as if science is the means all and the ends all for absolute truth. Okay, and this is absolutely just not the case, right? Science has got so many problems with it, and it's got so many limitations. It's good, it has its benefits. If you know that, if you know the limitations of science, then you can be productive with it. You keep it in its place and don't let it overstep its boundaries, right? For example, science cannot tell you anything about morality, right? Science cannot tell you anything about morality, right? And morality is a clear-cut refutation on this notion that the human species evolved. And Can you give an example? I'll give you my example. We as human beings are the only moral creatures, right? We are the only moral species on the planet, okay? We know right from wrong. We know this is evil. No matter what culture you go into, no matter what place you go into, no matter what time you go on, there are universal moral principles that everyone knows that it's wrong, okay? No matter what day and time and age you live in, we know that murder is wrong. We even know that lying is wrong. When a child lies for the very first time, scientists, they did research and they found that there are certain changes that take place in a child's body. For example, his heartbeat starts to race, his palms get sweaty, his voice starts to croak. And when they were asked why, they would say all we can say is that the human being wasn't created to lie, or it wasn't supposed to lie. They won't say created, but they say human being wasn't supposed to lie, wasn't made to lie, wasn't manufactured to lie. So where did this moral compass come from that shows you that lying is wrong? Where did this moral compass come from that shows you it's wrong for a person to murder another human being, to rape another human being? Where did that come from? Because when you usually what would they say? They will say evolution.
Oh.
No, well, if you say society, well then you have a problem, because Hitler managed to convince all or the majority of Germans at his time that the murder of the Jews was something that was morally correct.
True.
But even though he manipulated his society and managed to do that, we will still stand here and say that was immoral. But if you say no, society actually allows for a person's morality to be shaped, then that means you have to say, and I'm not saying this, but I'm saying this is what would be, this is what would necessitate from your speech. But what would necessitate from your speech is that at the time when Hitler managed to convince the people that murdering of the Jews is something that is a moral thing, and we need to do that to fulfill the objectives of the Aryan race, you would have to say that at that time, those German Nazi soldiers that were carrying out those executions and oppression, they were morally right. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it was immoral. But if you take that stance that society governed it, then you'd have to say that that was morally correct. And that's a problem, right? And no one's going to agree to that. So society didn't do it. Another argument that people will come from is something called consequentialism. They will say, we as a species, we looked at the consequences of our actions. We saw that murder had bad consequences. People got angry, upset, people took revenge, blah, blah, blah. So over time, we realized murder is wrong. We saw the same with lying. We saw that lying had negative consequences, etc., so on and so forth. So they said every time an action happened, over years, we would look at the benefits, and if it had benefits, it would become morally correct. And if it had negatives, then it would become it would become morally evil. And then what we would say in response to them is that there are clear-cut immoral actions that you can do that have no negative consequences. Yet you still believe that they're immoral.
Is this where your controversial video from 3 years ago
Right,
to play?
right, exactly. So, like, for example, if you give a person seminal fluid to drink, like if you give a guy, people don't get it, they don't understand, but I'm still understanding firm to this. If you give a guy a cup of seminal fluid and you say this is your dad's sperm, right? Your dad, he came in this cup, drink it. You're not gonna drink it. Why? What's wrong? What's the difference between a daughter drinking her dad's seminal fluid, or stuff like this is haram? It's not permissible for us to do even to our husbands and our spouses, but she will have no problem drinking the seminal fluid of her boyfriend or whatever else other guy that she happened to be with, but she'll do it with her. Why won't she do it with her father? Because immorally she knows there's something wrong here, right? Another example is that if you take a child who's like 6 months old and you have an adult, a filthy human being who masturbates over this child, is that immoral?
Of course.
But is there any negative consequence that can come from that? The child won't remember nothing.
It's sad because people actually use that as an argument to try and say that paedophilia should be allowed and this and that.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. When you adopt these, this is barbaric. When you adopt these barbaric, philosophies, it facilitates for stuff like this to happen, and it opens doors for things like this, right? So that child has no recollection of it. That child has absolutely no recollection. It cannot be psychologically damaged or scarred or whatever have you. But there's no negative consequence. In fact, the guy enjoyed himself. So for him, it's a positive. Do you see it? So consequentialism doesn't provide an answer. And then the answer that you usually run to is evolution. But we say, hold up, have you not seen the jungle? The jungle has, when adaptation occurs, according to you, it doesn't occur on the basis of moral value. It occurs on the basis of survival value.
Mm-hmm.
Survival value necessitates that you're going to have to do some pretty, what we would consider evil things in the animal kingdom. The Hanuman lauga monkey from India.
The what?
Hanuman lauga monkey. It's the name of a species of monkey in India. When it takes over, when it takes over a tribe of monkeys, it kills the leader. Not only that, what it does is that it actually kills all of the children of that leader. Because that one leader would sleep with all and would basically, mate with all of the other females. So would have many children. So he would not only kill the leader of the tribe, but he would kill all the other baby monkeys as well. He would murder them, right? So they don't one day overtake him. That we would consider it immoral. So if evolution is where we're getting our moral compass from, then, why the hell are our morals in direct opposition to
evolution?
What happens in evolution, right? The great white shark, it forcefully copulates when it mates. In other words, it rapes. But we consider rape to be an immoral thing. Do you see? So if we took our morals from evolution, then our morals would not be, there would be no morality. Our morality would be in line with survival of the fittest. You see what I'm saying? And it's not like that. It's not like that. And I've got a video in a bit more detail. It's called, I think it's called Atheist, Will You Drink Your Dad's Sperm? Or something like that. I know it's a bit of a controversial name, but I'll put the video link below. I discuss that in a bit more detail. The point I'm trying to make is that evolution doesn't... the point I'm trying to make is that evolution doesn't answer this fundamental question of morality. So how can you tell me this clear-cut evidence? But the Quran answers this question for you. The Quran tells you that you have a creator, a Lord who created you, and he instilled these morals and these values inside of you. Just skip through the verses and then you'll see the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran tells us that we were born upon what you call the fitrah, which is the innate natural disposition. This is in perfect consistency with the reality of our creation, right? Allah tells us that you have an innate knowledge, an innate understanding of morality that Allah has instilled in us the moment we were born. From this innate morality is what? The belief that there is a creator, right?
Okay.
And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has backed this up in his hadith. And in fact, there's actually a study that was done in the University of Cambridge by a professor called Justin Al-Barrett, where they proved...
Speaking so far, so
I know. But it's because time.
There
was a study that was done in the University of Cambridge by a professor called Justin Al-Barrett, yeah? And his study is actually very profound. If you go, just Google it and, Google it so you can find out what the name of his books are and you can purchase them. But he actually concluded that, if you were to take children from young and place them on an island where they would have to fend for themselves, and there was no external kind of influence on them, they would automatically grow up believing in a superior creator that sees them, that watches them, that hears them. And they did extensive study and research towards they came by means of which they came to this conclusion, and you can just go and check it up online. But I don't need to go to that scientific research, because my Lord Allah, once I've already established that the Quran is true, and I've established that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of Allah who was sent with this divine knowledge that was given to him, then I don't need to go to scientific evidence, because I'm getting it directly from the source. Do you see that we have something called the fitrah, the innate natural disposition? Another thing that evolution doesn't answer is how the first cell actually came into being. The first organism that split, that evolved, because there had to be a living organism that began to evolve. Do you see? Where did that living organism evolve from?
They say it came from nothing.
Well,
no,
hold up. They say they argue the universe came from nothing, some of them. But okay, the universe came from nothing, but within the universe there's these living organisms. The first cell that happened to come in this universe, that came from nothing too? Do you know how absurd that is? That's worse than me saying, hey, I have a hat and I'm going to pull a rabbit out of it. Because at least the person who believes that the rabbit came out of the hat, there was a hat for the rabbit to come out of. But these people believe that the rabbit came out of thin air. Do you see? And there's so many other things, like wallahi, for example,
strange, they affirm anomalies for nature but not for Allah.
Not for Allah, exactly. And I'm saying this is like Islam, akhi. Not that I'm saying this is the proof. Okay, not that I'm saying that this is the proof. Because we have objective evidence to establish that the Quran is indeed a divine word of Allah. Okay, and that's a video hopefully for another day. If they send in enough questions, inshallah, maybe we'll make a video on it. But this should be enough of an evidence, even though this is not our primary evidence. The fact that the Quran is in exact consistency and harmony with the rest of creation, and it fills in the gaps of science, right? This is not called God of the gaps. People will say, oh, you just want to place God wherever you can't answer a question. No, rather, we flip it. We say this is science of the gaps. That you've come to a limitation of science. Science can know... Science... How does the scientific method work? It is a means of observation, right? And from that observation, you extract a hypothesis. Which means that anything that you cannot look at, you cannot...
See.
You can extrapolate something from it, right? So if you can't observe, you can't extrapolate a hypothesis. So, morality, can you see it? No, morality is not something that you could see. So science or evolution will never be able to answer the question, why do I believe murder is wrong? Why do I believe that it's wrong for a person to rape? Why do I believe it's wrong for a person to masturbate over a 6-month-old baby? This is something that they will never be able to answer, right? So you have to go beyond the scope of science. Do you see where I'm coming from? So for a person to say, no, science will answer this question, that's science of the gaps. That's not God of the gaps. Do you see? Rather, we have a very fine. We're saying hold up. I mean, the discussion can go on. But now we're going into another topic. But there's so many other ways we can explain the weaknesses of evolution, right? Without even criticizing the scientific evidence. I'm not even going into that. That's a discussion for another day. I'd actually like to forward people to a brother called Subur Ahmed, yeah, who's got some really good material online on the issue of evolution, and hopefully I'll put some links below. And he even tackles it from a scientific perspective, right? But I'm just discussing it from the angle of, hold up, like, science is not the only way, right? There's so many other elements and factors that come into place, and the Quran is the only thing that answers those questions for you, right? So we have a very, very, very sound basis to reject the evolution of the macro evolution of the Homo sapien.
Wow, okay, I think that was... It's a very insightful, educational video.
I mean, to be honest, I don't really feel like we did the topic justice, because it's such a big topic, and I didn't actually prepare much on it. But I think it's nice to start a discussion. By no means is this the most conclusive answer on the issue, but I think.
I mean, if you have any questions, they can comment them.
Yeah, I think at least to start a nice, healthy, healthy discussion.
So they can either email them to us at nasihasession@gmail.com, or they can just comment down below.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll call it a day. We'll wrap that one up there.
Yeah. Sorry. One other thing I wanted to add there is that on this issue of proof, they say there's clear-cut proof. Just to mention, nothing scientific can ever be clear-cut proof. Nothing scientific, because that's what the guy said, right? He said we have clear-cut proof.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing scientific can ever be clear-cut proof.
Why?
The reason for that is because, like I said, science is based on observation. It's based on something called induction. It's observation, right? In order for you to say this is 100% truth, that means you've exhausted every possible observation. So let's say, for example, you went to Wales.
Okay.
And you observed sheep.
Sheep, okay.
Now, what color were the sheep?
Black.
Black. Okay. Now let's just say you observe sheep and they happen to be black, or they happen to be brown, or they happen to be white, whatever color they might be, but you only saw one color, right? According to you as a scientist, what would you extrapolate?
I would say that obviously all sheep are black.
All sheep are black, or all sheep are white, or all sheep are brown, right? So you are restricted to your limited observation, and you have to extrapolate your hypothesis and apply it on a general level based on your specific set of observations. Do you see? Now, let's just say, hold up. Now, you travel the world. You've traveled the world and you've explored, and there are black sheep, there are white sheep, there are brown sheep. Okay. So now you conclude, no, there's not just white sheep. There's black, brown, and white sheep. Okay. But have you still exhausted every possible observation?
No,
because there could be yellow sheep somewhere. There could be that one yellow sheep. So you can never say this is 100% conclusive. Do you see?
Because there's always a possibility.
Because there's always a possibility that you have. There's always a possibility that there's something you haven't seen. So when you look at it from this angle, it's like not only have you not exhausted all the present observations, but you don't know all the past observations, and you don't know all the future observations. Literally, it's like, imagine that there's this room and there's a door right there, yeah, and there's a keyhole. Imagine you don't know what's in this room. There's a whole bunch of things in this room, and you look from that keyhole inside this room. And I try to tell you, and I say, listen, tell me what's inside the room. And you look through that keyhole, and you tell me, hey, I see, X. Is that going to be representative of everything that's in the room?
Not at all.
No, you're limited by just that limited observation. Do you see? And that's what science is like. You can bring all the scientists in the world together and have them observe any one particular thing. They still do not have the full picture. They only have a piece of the puzzle. They only have what you would call a pixel of the entire picture, or a puzzle piece of the entire puzzle. Whereas Allah, now this is why we say taking it from Allah is better, because Allah's got the whole picture. Allah's got the whole puzzle. Do you see? And all we have to do is just establish that the Quran is indeed from Allah, and then all of that makes sense. Then anything that Allah says just makes sense. Anything that Allah says, we give Him that, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you see?
Okay.
What's interesting about science is that science itself is based upon mathematical axioms, right? This is what you call a presumption of science, because physics is based upon mathematical axioms. An axiom is a presupposed belief. It's a belief that you just believe it. There's no actual real belief or evidence for it. So we just kind of came to the conclusion without any scientific evidence that mathematical axioms exist and the whole universe can be basically broken down into mathematical principles. And based upon that we have physics, and based upon that we have biology and chemistry. So the entire foundation of science is built upon something that science cannot prove. But can we prove these mathematical axioms? Through logic, yes. Through logic, but not through science. So again, science has to rely upon a totally different science, a totally different epistemology, a totally different means to knowledge, a totally different means to truth, in order for all of its foundations to exist. Do you see? So how can you ever say science is clear-cut proof? Science scientifically cannot even prove its own existence. Do you see? And just the final point on this, just to show you really how limited science is indeed, is the fact that all of scientific research is based on what? It's based on something called testimony. Testimony, yeah? You as a scientist, let's just say Richard Dawkins is here, and he's an evolutionary biologist. Has he done all of the evolutionary experiments that there are? No. He has to rely, when he does his experiments, when he does his particular research, he has to rely upon the findings and the results of scientists before him. Do you understand? There's a very deep point here. I want the brothers and sisters to really follow in, okay? Atheists, pay attention. فَتَنَبَّأ, which means observe in Arabic. Science is based upon testimony. Okay. You as a scientist, if you've come to a particular belief, you have to believe the findings of the studies of scientists before you. You can't go out of your way and do their studies. How many of the scientists today have actually gone out of their way and observed all of the evolutionary conclusions and findings they are themselves? No, they've just taken it from the scientists before them. So in other words, you've had to trust. Okay. All of their findings, right?
Okay.
So you believed without scientifically verifying yourself. Do you understand?
Yeah.
You believed without scientifically verifying yourself. What was the proof that you had? What was the evidence that you took to believe his findings?
Previous scientists.
It was just the fact that I trust him. My question is he even trustworthy? How many times have we seen that science scientific findings have been bent. The research has been twisted and manipulated and interpreted to kind of fit a particular mold. Sometimes you have people that are funding. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. They fund so much scientific research and study, but to influence their own particular agendas.
It's true.
Right? And there's so many examples. Just see research online, scientific, scandals and whatnot. Entire papers have been published, manipulating evidence, and based on that manipulated evidence, conclusions have been made. And based on those conclusions, you've established a worldview. And then you've gone and done studies based on that conclusion. Do you see? So that whole process is flawed because you don't even have a way to verify if these findings are correct. But you see, Islam, we have something called the isnad, the chain of narration, in which we have to ensure that anyone who passes me information, whether that information might be prophetic traditions, or the Quran itself, or even if it is scientific study, all right, I have to know that who I got it from, this chain is number one connected. Then I have to affirm that everyone in this chain is trustworthy. There's a whole science called al-jarh wa ta'dil, which is the science of criticizing and praising narrators in a particular chain. So if we apply this to science, I have to ensure that this study you actually got it from the scientist who actually did this study. How do I know there's no disconnection in the chain? Number one. Number two, I have to affirm that all the scientists in this chain are trustworthy. Okay? And the process for affirming a person's trustworthiness goes down to his competence of actually, his dabt, his competence, his memory, his actual ability in this particular field to be on point with it. And the second thing is down to his morality. Is he a trustworthy person? Is he a genuine person? Is he a person who is known to lie? Is he an alcoholic? Maybe he was drinking and he confused himself. He was drunk. He was intoxicated at the time he did this study. But in our hadith tradition, you're not allowed, like this is a shay'un akhar. If you come and you're a person who's drinking, we're gonna put a big X on you, because why? You might have been intoxicated at the time you were interpreting this study. And then you published it and the whole world believed it. Do you see? It's a very deep discussion. So the point I'm making is that even from that angle, science is weak. So how can you expect me to say this is clear evidence and me just take it on face value? No, the most I can say is that I will take science when it comes to things that can be observed, but I will limit it with regards to that which it can be observed. And that which is outside and beyond the scope of science, I will allow my Creator Allah to tell me. I will allow Allah to tell me. We have an authentic chain to Allah with the Quran. We have an authentic chain. We have these mutawatir chains authentically going back from the tabi'een and to the companions of the Prophet and to the Prophet himself, to the angel Jibreel, to Allah himself, right? We have an authentic chain from Allah, this Quran. We can prove that this is really from Allah. Like, that's a discussion in a bit more detail for another day.
I agree that most of that I think was a discussion for another day, but we've just put a whole week into one day.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's a big topic. I didn't get a chance to put my thoughts down.
I think we'll leave it there before it gets out of control.
Yeah.
It gets out of the way. If you're watching this, inshallah, tell your friends to watch it. Tell them to have a dictionary nearby, inshallah. Some big words used there. I think, should we call it a day?
Yeah. Sorry, I've been out of the atheist da'wah for about 2 years.
Yeah,
but I'm just
letting
people know I'm still here. We've been out there refuting the mubtadi'a, but the atheists.
Okay, so if you do have any questions, feel free to ask, inshallah, no problem. You can, like I said earlier, comment down below, email us, and we'll try and do another video to address any question you might have. Until then, was Richard Dawkins thiqa? Was he not? Who knows?
ثقة means was he trustworthy.
Until next time.
لكن هو رجل متروك.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم.